When you drive from here to maybe Los Angeles, you see acres and acres and acres of monocrops. And we all know the dangers of monocrops. Yeah, you can produce a lot of stuff, but all it takes is one pest to find that crop, and then the whole entire crop is gone. And I can tell you right now that my kale plants grow better when they're surrounded by other types of things, as opposed to just me just having 2 or 3 rows of kale plants. We're here on a half an acre in South Oak Park, what they call, which is a food desert according to the USDA. And so right around 2008, 2009, when the Great Recession happened last time, I took to growing food in the backyard here, starting with maybe about 30 or 40 square feet. And in doing so, I just caught the bug of growing my own food, and not just the growing food part of it, but just being out in nature, connecting to nature, and really understanding the resiliency of the natural world. And so in looking at that, I realized that it was all about relationships. And so in this community, which is known as the hood or the ghetto, or depending on who you talk about, it is now being gentrified. I realized that the reason why you have neighborhoods where, we call it food desert, but I really think about it as food apartheid because of redlining, white supremacy, and all those different types of things. But at the end of the day, what the core thing of why these communities remain this way is because of a lack of relationships. Because it started out where I was here by myself. I started to bring my children out. We started to work out here. We started to eat together. We also started to cook together. And as a result, I realized that eating, growing your own food is a way of building community. And so with that, I was like, this is what we need to have in our community. So around 2011, my wife and I, Judith, we decided that we were going to take what we were doing on a small scale in our backyard and then go out into the community with this idea of a homegrown revolution.
I got into farming after working in the food industry for many years, so I think this is just a natural transition into, wondering where all this food I was preparing actually came from. Eating good food, I learned early on, makes people happy. I think I'm on a quest to make as many people happy as possible, and if I can do that through a good meal and I get to take care of their stomachs and hopefully help them have a better day by giving them something good to eat. So I don't know, I think I enjoy that part the most. I remember going with my mom to the grocery store, and we had grocery stores in town. I grew up in Compton in the late 80s and early 90s, and there's grocery stores there, but the quality of the produce wasn't the greatest, so we would travel 30 miles in LA is a long drive. Having a lower access to food and then going into the food industry, I really just figured it'd be like a good way to learn to eat and just teaching myself about what's healthy and what tastes good at the same time. I think I've been on a quest to figure that out, like what's healthy, what's good for you and good for the environment. I think breaking down barriers in the food and ag world is important. Because we have a tendency to think that there's only one way to grow vegetables, there's only one way to, one place to get them. And it's just access to the land is tied with that. We tend to have people of European descent, or the majority of the farmers in this country, yet, there's a variety of people who eat in this country from a variety of countries and backgrounds. And I think we tend to forget that. So it's important. I think once we have a bigger diversity of folks who are working the land and in ownership of the land, then we can open up that to other folks to grow food for themselves. Yeah.
At Farms to Grow, we started with the mission to support African American farmers, sprout the next generation of small farmers, and make sure that we had a story to tell. We wanted to address the prevalent and persistent gaps that we saw when it came to services and providing resources, information, and just going out and checking on farmers. We didn't see any of that. And so The organization started as a way to do something. It's a really precarious situation that Black farmers are in. No support to keep land, very little support to get land. And unless there's something really intentional, they will continue to lose land. And with losing land, they lose the legacy of the farming knowledge, local ecological knowledge that's very fragile.
For example, my great-grandfather was a farmer in Texas. And you know, he was able to keep his land. He had to fight the KKK, he had to keep a shotgun by his door, those types of things. But he had ancestral wisdom. Everything was organic back then. You took things from on your farm and you used those things to put back into your soil, and so the soil, so that you could then grow something and come back. So there's deep ancestral wisdom with people of color that many people are still in trust of. And so when it's time for them to get on the land, that relates to climate change, because these methods, industrial farming, commercial farming methods, are the reason why we're destroying the earth. All we have to do, is not like we have to do anything to change the climate, we just have to stop polluting. And once we stop polluting, the earth will clean itself up. It's a self-cleaning organism. And those types of voices, those types of ideas, models of farmers who are using ecologically sound methods and rivaling or even bettering the types of yields that these commercial farmers are getting, are the types of things that we need to have at the table. So it's not just one voice.
These are farmers that come from heritage, come from a whole generation of making sure that they take care of the land. And it's so important that these are the farmers that we keep farming. So they continue to do the farming that they've always been doing. What has been challenging is that they have had threats to their farming through racist and discriminatory practices that, you know, push them to the edge. So it's not about them not figuring out how to deal with climate. It's really about them trying to figure out how to deal with folks trying to take their land, or folks trying to prevent them from having opportunities for growth. But left to their own devices and supported, Black farmers, as well as other traditional small-scale farmers, could do an incredible job of feeding us and taking care of the environment. And now is the time that we've got to make sure that we put them up front.
So the California Farmer Justice Collaborative, it formed as, I guess you could say, a germination of different farmers of color coming together and recognizing we've been left out of the prosperity in a place where at some point all of the food in the United States, or pretty much all the food in the United States, was being produced, i.e. the Central Valley, which we're part of. And so here we are 400 and some odd years later, since the beginning of maybe California as a state, and here we are still not being able to get resources, not knowing about the resources. And so the idea was, how can we get ourselves at the table, and how can we get our voices heard? And so with that, we put together the Farmer Equity Act, right? Which really takes the same language that the USDA uses to talk about socially disadvantaged farmers. Now, the CDFA has appointed someone whose job it is to make sure that there are studies that are looked into to find out why is it that farmers of color up and down the state of California are not able to get access to the same resources.
I want to start a farm to bring others into farming. I mean, I definitely want to farm for myself, which is a longtime dream of mine, but I'm looking for a way to start new farmers and to engage them in agriculture. And hopefully, if there's enough space, I would love to open up access to other farmers, Black farmers, farmers of color who want to get into farming too. So that's my general plan and goal with the farm too. And just to help feed people. Again, like I said earlier, I like making people happy and like seeing their smiles when they're like, oh, that's what a tomato plant looks like, you know?
Finally, it's been so long. This thing got cut down. I thought it was gonna die, but it's made it. Perfect.
Previous to this, I was in the IT field, networking specifically. And so when you think about a network, you can't have one single point of failure. So whenever we would put a system together, you would have a system, but then you'd have another system, and then you'd have another system, and then you'd have another system. That's called redundancy, right? So if one goes down, another one can pick up where that one failed, and then if that one fails, you have another one. That idea of having multiple places where multiple people are growing multiple things, that means that we're not just relying on one person for tomatoes. There might be, you might like the slicers, but then this person's good at the cherry tomatoes. And then you have the other person that's good with the heirloom tomatoes. So then you have those three people that can trade, barter their own tomatoes. But then don't forget, you've got the beans, and you've got the amaranth, then you've got the sunflowers. So then you have this distributed network of people that are all growing different things that can come together and start to share their crops, share their wisdom, share their knowledge, and then you even share their connections.
I am happy to say that I think we got this. I think we're going to be okay. You know, we've got young people of every persuasion that's coming into farming. You know, folks are opening their minds to, you know, the relationships that we can have with land. It doesn't have to be an owner. We can go back to the commons. We can go back to worker-owned co-ops. All these new ways in which communities are engaging with the land that they can grow their food. It is a brighter future today than I feel like it was 5 years ago. And so I hope that 5 years from now, it's even brighter.
I want to remain hopeful about the future of agriculture. I am actually. I'm such a cynic, but I am hopeful about the future of agriculture. I'm a cynic because it's challenging that it takes a lot of money to get started in agriculture. I'm hopeful that there's folks out there who want to help other people get started and lower those costs to get in the door to farming, and I think we'll be okay. Is that hopeful? That might be hopeful.